Sabrina 2000s comic, issue 29. Sabrina cheers, and Hilda asks what's all that screaming about. A hope spot, I'm guessing. She's cheering about getting a free cruise to the Caribbean. Salem says that he keeps telling her it's probably a sales scam. That'd be realistic of the writing. It could all be a plan to try to make people sit down at a meeting to be told that they should buy a condo share. I remember that there was an episode of the sitcom where Sabrina went on a cruise with her two friends and got stranded on an island without magic in the Bermuda Triangle. So, them going on a cruise is just them lazily recycling an idea for the story. I wonder if the writer actually saw that episode. She gives her aunts tickets aboard a cruise ship. Why isn't anyone listening to Salem? Isn't it obvious that they wouldn't be given a ticket for free without a catch? Won't it take one Google search to figure out what the right decision is? The people need something to gain from this. Maybe the stuff on the cruise itself isn't free. Thanks, Sabrina. You're a witch. Can't you use magic to give yourself a cruise for free? Zap everything up, including robot servants. Maybe she'd think to do that if her aunts let her use her magic more. They could nag her to do her homework and schoolwork if they ever have to, after warping to her. Salem cheers out of nowhere and says he loves to go cruising. Didn't he just say it was a scam? Why doesn't he explain himself properly? Sabrina probably doesn't even know what the words sales scam mean. Salem's told he can't go because there's only 2 tickets and he's a pet. Surprisingly, because the plot demands a story around that and no other reason, Hilda says that Sabrina's allowed to go on the cruise, but it's not reckless of them because she is going to be supervised by one of her aunts. Also, they're witches. They can just warp home and erase any memories they need to. Zelda says that the dates work out with her school break. Hilda says that it's okay because she and Zelda will pull a double shift. And Salem complains that it didn't work out the last time for them. The only way this double shift could be gotten away with is if Zelda made herself look like Hilda anytime she impersonated her. If a witch can impersonate other witches, you'd think there'd be society-wide anarchy, Blade Runner plot, because nobody would be able to know who's really who without confirmation. The most high-level government jobs could be infiltrated pathetically easily. Or I'm overthinking and it's not about shapeshifting at all. People working on the boat would obviously be confused at seeing a new person show up. I guess these ads are too moral in their eyes to just zap up a 3rd ticket. But pulling an equally illegal double shift scam is a-okay. A few days later at the seaport, wait, why is it not right now? Whatever. I don't know how these things work. Why were all those panels wasted instead of us just seeing the "and so" panel? Hilda says their first activity is asking a cute cabin boy to take the luggage to their stateroom. She asks him to drop off a room service menu. Hilda says the suitcase is awfully heavy and that's because Salem's in it. Salem asks her to help with the sunscreen and no, he doesn't get warped away because that'd be smart. Instead she turns him into a black tulip and keeps him around for no reason. At least that's the same color. It's merciful of her to let him stay on the cruise ship, but clearly terrible to make him a flower. It was impressively smart of Hilda to nip the cliché stowaway problem in the bud right away. She says he's not ruining this trip for them. After all, they'd get in trouble if anyone saw him with them, or he'd be chased off the cruise ship even if he was apart from them in a second. So why did he even bother? He should have known these witches wouldn't let him do this. I guess she turned him into a tulip because he just warped back here if he was warped home. I like that Sabrina feels sorry for Salem. Why is she surprised that Zelda switched with Hilda? Didn't the words double shift mean anything to her? And why does Zelda not look like Hilda here? She'll get in trouble. In fact, Esteban even notices that she doesn't look like Hilda, and somehow rationalizes it away as him eating burritos. Zelda says right in front of Esteban without knowing it that her uncle Salty Spellman was an ancient magic mariner who taught her how to sail, so she thinks she can charm this ship's navigator into showing them the charts for this cruise. Logically, he'd find out she's a witch from this. But no, he just thinks it's the burrito's fault. You can't have him follow them and spy on them out of curiosity at least, because that'd be interesting. Zelda says that on the ship's course, they'll pass through the Bermuda Quadrangle. What a cliche. The sitcom already did this. Why do this? Why not make it the Dragon Triangle instead? That's also a real-life place associated with Chip's appearances. It's at least effort on the writer that he calls it the Quadrangle instead. He didn't have to do that. Somehow a lot of people thought Salty was wacky when he said he created the Bahama Quadrangle, including Hilda, when she knows witches exist. It turns out that place is dangerous. It better not be because of the same reason the show has, that it makes witches powerless. Because there's no reason for that to be the case. And Hilda gets switched with Zelda at the worst possible moment and insists on not being helpful, even though that'd make her niece feel better. I have this story. In the comedy page, Hilda can't sleep knowing that the last piece of cheesecake is in the kitchen. She stupidly tries to sneak in there instead of just warping the cake to her, or creating a duplicate of it. Harvey had this kind of plot twice in the 70s comic. Hilda gets hurt a lot, and it turns out it's because Salem was clipping his claws on the floor, and not because her relatives were mean enough to leave invisible traps for her just in case she tries to get the cake at night. Which would have taken advantage of magic at least. Anyways, in the main story, Hilda says that the sailor was a kook, ignoring Sabrina's protests. Why in the world does she think a warlock didn't create a Bermuda Triangle? A witch could do anything. She should at least explain that the Witches' Council would have gotten rid of that spell right away after a spy witch would catch him at best, or rumors would spread at worst. At least she wants her to relax. Predictably, Zelda comes back after a buzzing because Sabrina predicted it for us. She says that they've got to get this chip out of the quadrangle. Use your magic, moron. We know witches can turn boats around. She says that Hilda was just jealous because Salty liked her better. A guy tells them that the captain has requested that everyone stay in their rooms until the ship passes through a storm. Witches are here. Can't they just use their magic to fix the storm right away? She's able to send an obstructive jerk to the bulge. I thought it was badass that she said, "Don't point that finger at me unless you know how to use it." It starts thundering and lightning as I wonder why the hell there isn't an hour every time in between Hilda and Zelda switching. How are either of them supposed to get any enjoyment out of the cruise this way? This is forced. Hilda shows up and Sabrina gets returned to her bedroom. I'm starting to wonder who's really right. Hilda explains that that's just the way Salty operated. Wait for a natural phenomenon, and then take credit for it. That could be the case. Now there's mystery going on, when I thought Hilda was just being an idiot. Why would he create a big storm area? How would that profit him? Sabrina complains about not being able to relax because her aunts keep bickering. It's interesting to see her aunts' magic abuse backfiring for once. But it's kind of contrived that's even happening here, because what are the chances that the cruise ship was gonna go through this place? Zelda shows up saying that Hilda's absorbed in a plumbing problem back home. Lucky for Sabrina that it was Hilda and not Zelda. They fall over because the ship's caught in the next cortex. Sabrina asks if they can just teleport the ship. Why didn't they do that when a storm was approaching? Instead, somehow teleporting the ship is beyond their combined capability. At that point, it would actually be better if we were told that there was no magic in the quadrangle allowed. Because that would explain them not using magic. Out of nowhere, Zelda wishes Salem was here. At least we got a use of the Chekhov's gun. He and Zelda talk to spirits to teleport the ship to calm seas, and the captain shrugs it off as long as they're safe. Oh good, the story ends with some realism. A tip-top timeshare salesman shows up at their door, and says that they have to listen to his sales pitch and watch a 2-hour video. Sabrina is somehow smiling when she tells Salem that he was right, when Salem's somehow being stupid enough to turn back into a tulip when he could just warp home instead. There's no reason Zelda wouldn't use magic to brainwash him into changing his mind and getting a good career. I hope Sabrina's smiling because she knows that Zelda's gonna get them out of this. Because she has teleportation powers, and the ability to erase memories. At least the plot had a twist and they didn't become powerless in the storm. The next story starts out with Salem telling the audience that he's gonna welcome them to Salem's Strange Tales. That made me uninterested right away because it's just gonna be fiction within fiction, which is pointless. but if it doesn't involve main characters I have grudges against, maybe I won't be as frustrated with it. He says that tonight's story begins when a bus arrives in town and a stranger steps on it that looks like a vacuum cleaner salesman to most people. I wish there was a proper framing device for this story with Salem talking to his friends, not the audience, which makes it harder to get invested in the story because he keeps being in the panels. He says that the guy is actually the witch hunter, and he's a professor, like the one with the speech impediment at the end of the 70s comic that reminded me of Eggman. Okay, that's interesting. Witch truthers would exist, because some witnesses to magic would slip through the cracks for a spy which is completely swamped with work. Oh great, Sabrina will be a part of the story. This could have been the perfect excuse to have some other characters. Brand new characters that we don't know to have plot armor. Instead, it's a foregone conclusion that the witch hunter will fail. At least Salem won't be talking to us in the panel in every panel. Sabrina says that the person ringing the doorbell must be Harvey looking for help with his homework. We already know she's going to be wrong because of that first page. Surprisingly, when Sabrina opens the door, she says there's no one there, and Zelda asks what that weird noise was. It came from outside, and the witch hunter's there, and Zelda screams. If the artist wasn't horrible or the editor didn't suck, whoever's responsible for this crap anyways, then I would have seen what was going on and stayed invested in the story instead of worthless thwomp sound effects showing up, in a comic whose tone is usually mean-spirited anyways. And it's not like it's censoring something violent anyways. He effortlessly traps them in a witch vac like they're ghosts, and he outright explains why this makes sense, because it not only shrinks witches, but renders them powerless. He rants loudly while stupidly staying still, revealing that he's told people about witches for years, but they laughed at him, which hopefully is supposed to explain why the spy witches didn't erase his memory right away. There'd be a lot more people out there like him. In fact, he joined a forum on the internet dedicated to them. But mentioning the internet here would be better writing than this comic gets. And this is already an issue where he's stupid enough to stand there instead of running away and guaranteeing his victory. He says he began to hear rumors of strange happenings in this town that apparently people hadn't been forced to forget by surveillance witches. So he investigated. Are there witches really so reckless as to not erase memories of every instance of magic? He explains that rather than having a witch detector, he outright saw the three of them flying on a broom outside the house. That's more believable. It'd be kind of embarrassing if the comic never explained how he has this magical device, which would only be possible with magic. At least Do Anything Geniuses have to work hard to earn building a device that can do what he wants, being trapped in one place the whole time. He says that now he has the evidence to show the world that witches do exist. Wouldn't people assume they aren't witches and he's just able to capture anybody? He'd have to prove that he can't simply capture anybody. Then people would assume that he was able to capture them because they had their specific DNA. Salem, the narrator, explains that he couldn't help them because he was busy. Why isn't he shown as a head in a text box on the top of the panels instead? Oh, we actually see what he meant. He says that bathing is important, and reveals that he did help them. So why did he have to say he couldn't help them earlier? I was looking forward to something creative and new, but who else would save them? It sure is lucky for Salem that the witch hunter is still here. Salem's pretty close to him. So logically, in all the time he was talking just a couple of feet away from him, he would have alerted his attention to him. He really should have been drawn to have a thought bubble instead. He pretends to be a normal cat. Aw man, I thought he'd pet Salem since he smiled and called him Kitty. That'd make the professor seem human. Instead, he's such a one-dimensional villain that I don't feel like he deserves to be called by his name. He says he's studied witches long enough to know that they sometimes take the form of a cat. But there's so many other forms they could take. It's so convenient that he knows this. Why didn't we see Salem get put in the vacuum? He says he'll hunt down witches everywhere. I understand, he's just scared. Then there's a zap, and he's trapped in the vacuum cleaner himself. How could anyone from the outside teleport the people trapped inside a place where they're powerless? It'd be enchanted against teleportation. Oh bullshit, it turns out the narrator was a different Salem. And Sabrina says he can't be in the story because he's the narrator. He even talked as if he was Salem. I thought the narrator was future Salem. He ends the story saying that he said this was a strange tale. So he's a Deus Ex Machina who saved them. Well, witches can time travel. I've read enough Archie Sonic and Rick and Morty to understand this completely. He's just a parallel universe version of Salem. We even saw that there was one in one story. He's even wearing different clothes. I wish we were told how and why he's on Salem's Earth, but it's not impossible in a world with witches in it and alternate universes. But it could have very easily been Salem who saved the day. I'm glad there was a twist though, instead of the writer going with a lazy, predictable idea that's been done too many times. So was I really supposed to assume the professor invented that vacuum himself? No mortal could invent this. I'm really glad I bothered to read this story because of the villain alone. In the next story, Sabrina complains that Harvey looks love-struck again. It turns out he's not literally love-struck, and just loves the class pet lizard. Sabrina's really selfish here if she thinks he never should have been put in charge of the class pet because he cares about it. And it's especially confusing that she's portrayed like this here when she's usually refusing to use her magic for selfish reasons. Chloe's in agreement with her. Desperate for attention, Sabrina asks Harvey to study with Chloe in her house. I guess he's gonna say no because he doesn't look happy, and this would make her happy. Why is she even considering inviting a mortal to her house? He stupidly says no to a girl asking him to go to her house because he'd rather go to the zoo to check out the iguanas. Sabrina cleverly lies right away that she was gonna show him her new pet lizard, which changes his mind. This reminds me of the old good Sabrinas. I'd actually respect her in this comic if she was this smart all the time. She could zap up a new lizard, or turn Salem into one if she wanted. She tells Chloe that she's gonna use her aunt's collection of charms and potions to conjure up the best lizard that Harvey's ever seen. If she says baddest in a spell, that would mean magic would interpret it literally and the lizard would be evil. God forbid they not have a plot that punishes her for using her magic almost every time. When this should be simple. It'd be dumb of Sabrina to screw this up. Why can't she simply zap up a lizard by pointing? Chloe points out that this stuff is only to be used with proper witch guidance. And I hope Sabrina is meant to be interpreted as lying when she says it's not a message meant for her, because if it was intended to be seen by mortals, it wouldn't mention witches at all. She finds the transformation charm. Why the hell does she say, "Make me a lizard"? Isn't it obvious right away just from reading that spell that the literal-minded magic would turn her into a lizard? Why can't she be turned back instantly? Why would the charm disappear? Why wouldn't she have gotten Salem's help? Sabrina talks as if she had a choice in the matter over which words to use. So it was entirely her fault. Why did she have to talk instead of just imagining a lizard for a few seconds and pointing? She lampshades that she shouldn't have used the words, "make me a lizard," and this is right in front of Harvey as he looks in the window. And Chloe tells Sabrina that she's gotta change herself back. Why the hell is the panel drawn this way if we're supposed to assume that Harvey can't hear this very incriminating dialogue? He goes to see the lizard and sweetly calls it little guy, and Sabrina runs away so fast that he wants to take a closer look. So she must have used magic to run faster. Because Harvey's running after Sabrina, she recklessly uses magic in front of him, jumping really high. It's not reckless if the plan is that he'll forget with magic though. He says this is a super lizard, and so the whole world should know about it. Harvey runs into the wall because Sabrina turns intangible. Sadly, we don't actually see how she got back to normal because fuck priorities. Did Chloe find a second transformation charm after the first one destroyed itself from use for no reason? Instead, the story ends with Harvey taking forever trying to catch that super lizard while she wants him to leave. That's not a good ending. I'd rather see Sabrina erase his memory of the whole event. When Hilda turned herself into a fly, in the 70s comic, the reason she stayed a fly for the whole story was properly explained. She forgot the chant that she was supposed to say to turn back to normal. At least if they explained that, the story would make sense. Even then, I really wish the magic book wasn't something that was off limits, so that Chloe could get it for Sabrina. The first story, by Mike Gallagher, is about Sabrina going on a free cruise with her aunts because she won the ticket in the mail, while everyone else inexplicably ignores Salem's warning that it's just a sales scam. You'd think the aunts would have learned that by now. One Google search could have prevented the entire story, and we're supposed to believe that all of her aunts are smart. And the cruise encounters a huge storm. So for some reason Zelda has to combine her powers with Salem to warp the ship out of the way of it. and it's actually left ambiguous whether or not the Bermuda Quadrangle is a magical spell or just a regular storm. And the witches aren't powerless when they're there, which makes more sense. Part of the tension is that Hilda keeps replacing Zelda because of a spell, and she doesn't believe the ship will be in danger even though she's a witch. I guess that story was alright. The second story, which has a completely unnecessary framing device where Salem is shown talking to the audience at first, is actually interesting and exciting because it's about an inevitable witch hunter who captures Sabrina and her family in a vacuum. Then they end up saved by a parallel universe version of Salem. Either that or Salem from a different point in time after time traveling. And it's supposed to be a joke that the narrator shouldn't be able to save the day, but stranger things have happened in this comic than that. All of the tension of the story was gone the minute it turned out that it would star Sabrina and her family after all, because it was obvious that the salesman would fail and they'd go free. Even though he could be shown to succeed just fine, because it could be a fictional story that's being told by Salem. It doesn't have to star Sabrina and her family. It was interesting to see a science-focused character go against a witch in a story that wasn't horribly contrived like the Wendy Nagas arc's ending. It made sense that he got the upper hand, because he surprised the witches and trapped them before they could even see him. And the minute that another witch that he didn't trap went up to him, he immediately got his plan foiled. The final story, by Angelo, is about Sabrina trying to get Harvey over at her house by telling him that she has a pet lizard. And shockingly, she doesn't simply zap one up, and instead uses a transformation charm. And because she didn't get her aunt's guidance, she was dumb enough to say a spell that turned her into a lizard. And Harvey chased after her. At least the story brought back the addition to his personality that he likes lizards, because he actually wants to visit a zoo with them, and cares more about that than being in Sabrina's house. Which is nothing like the 70s comic and cartoon where he went there all the time and didn't have to be bribed. It was kinda entertaining to see Sabrina repeatedly use magic to try to avoid Harvey, to the point of going intangible while he ran into the wall. It was so baffling that this plot had the twist it did. The transformation charm seemed to have vanished, and we didn't even get to see how she turned back to normal.